Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
When your destination is discovery, there are no wrong turns. That's why, at its very core, the new 2025 Lincoln Aviator SUV provides momentum beyond mere transportation. In this thoughtfully crafted and confidence-inspiring SUV, your destination is not about where you can go, but who you can be. Explore more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Aviator trademarks afford or its affiliates.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. The nursery rhyme goes like this. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. You can almost picture a young child singing this to themselves or reciting it alongside classmates. Except the lyrics are distressing and uncomfortable and point to the murder of 2 people and implicate the daughter in their killings. The story of Lizzie Borden is equally mysterious because the murders she is believed to have committed are among the most brutal and violent, and what appeared to be an open and shut murder case was anything but. Inarguably one of the most famous murder cases in United States history, the story of Lizzie Borden and the axe murders committed against her parents remain unsolved to this day. And the home where the murders took place is considered one of the most haunted homes in the country. In the 130-plus years since the murders, visitors to the home have reported a wide range of scary paranormal phenomenon. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the infamous Lizzie Borden Murders and the terrifying Lizzie Borden Hauntings. Did Lizzie Borden get away with committing literal axe murder back in 1892? Or is someone else responsible for the brutal killings? And is the Lizzie Borden house actually haunted? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse.
destination is discovery. There are no wrong turns. That's why, at its very core, the new 2025 Lincoln Aviator SUV provides momentum beyond mere transportation. In this thoughtfully crafted and confidence-inspiring SUV, your destination is not about where you can go, but who you can be. Explore more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Aviator trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Lizzie Borden was born on July 19, 1860, in Fall River, Massachusetts, about an hour's drive south of Boston. At the time of the infamous axe murders, Fall River was a bustling city with a population of nearly 75,000 people. Born to Andrew Borden and Sarah Borden, Lizzie experienced tragedy at an early age when her mother died in 1863. Lizzie also had an older sister, Emma, who was 9 years her senior. The two grew up in a religious home and attended Central Congregational Church. Lizzie was heavily involved in church activities, including, quote, teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to the United States, end quote. 3 years after Sarah Borden's death, when Lizzie was just 6 years old, Andrew married Abby Gray. Lizzie's relationship with her stepmother was likely not the best, as she felt Mrs. Borden, as Lizzie called her, married her father for money. By most accounts, Lizzie was popular and friendly, and she devoted a considerable part of her life to charitable work. This was in stark contrast to her father, who was described as, quote, dour and parsimonious, end quote. Despite his considerable wealth, the Bordens lived in an affluent area. However, it was not considered the most fashionable neighborhood. The home did not have indoor plumbing, despite the Bordens having the financial means to put this in place. It is largely believed, quote, Lizzie and her elder sister Emma were ever at odds with him and their stepmother, often over financial matters, end quote. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, Andrew Borden left to conduct business, leaving behind Abby, their live-in maid Bridget Sullivan, also known as Maggie, and Lizzie. A few hours later, he returned from his business meeting and lay down on the couch to catch a short nap. It was the last time anyone saw Andrew Borden alive. Sometime around 11:10 a.m., Lizzie, quote, discovered her father dead, repeatedly struck in the head with a sharp instrument. Upstairs, his wife's body was found, even more brutally mutilated, end quote. According to one article, Lizzie was reported calling out to Bridget Sullivan, quote, Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him, end quote. Andrew Borden was found dead on the couch where he'd fallen asleep, and it appeared he'd been struck by a sharp object several times in the head and face. Abby Borden was found dead upstairs, lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood in the guest room. The wounds inflicted on the two were brutal and extensive. An autopsy on Abby Borden revealed she'd, quote, been struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, causing her to fall face down on the floor, end quote. She suffered, quote, a wound on the back at the juncture of the neck and body, that ran upwards and downwards for 2.5 inches, 3 contusions on the face, 2 over the left eye, and 1 just over the bridge of the nose. A hole in the right side of the skull that was 4.5 to 5.25 inches in size, through which the brain had evacuated." End quote. Andrew Borden's wounds were brutal as well. According to one article, quote, "Andrew was slumped on a couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes had been split cleanly in 2, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked." End quote. Another article stated, quote, "Over the left temple, a wound 6 by 4 inches wide had been made as if it had been pounded with the dull edge of an axe. The left eye had been dug out, and a cut extended the length of the nose. The face was hacked to pieces, and the blood had covered the man's shirt." End quote. Speculation over who killed Andrew and Abby Borden began immediately, with investigators questioning both Maggie and Lizzie about the incident. Something interesting. Upon arriving at the Borden residence, investigators discovered Abby Borden's body cold, but they discovered Andrew Borden's body warm, indicating Abby had been killed sometime earlier than Andrew. And the wounds on Andrew's body were still bleeding, indicating the attack was recent to the time of their arrival. The famous nursery rhyme, it seems, had gotten a few details wrong. Andrew and Abby Borden were not murdered by an axe, but rather a hatchet. And though the lyrics claimed the two were struck 81 times, the pair suffered a combined 30 blows from the hatchet. The only detail the rhyme got right was the order of the murders. First Abby, then Andrew. As investigators worked to piece together the details surrounding the murders, they developed a profile of the killer, and they, quote, "considered the killings the work of a man, probably a foreigner," end quote. One article stated, quote, "Initial speculation as to the identity of the murderer centered on a Portuguese laborer who had visited the Borden home earlier in the morning and asked for the wages due him, only to be told by Andrew Borden that he had no money and to call later," end quote. They interviewed Lizzie, who gave strange and contradictory answers. She'd say one thing, only to say something different a few days later. Details didn't add up. Timelines didn't make sense. Investigators were troubled by Lizzie's demeanor, which was described as, quote, "too calm and poised," end quote. Perhaps the most disconcerting details were Lizzie's constantly changing alibis. The Borden home was searched, though interestingly, investigators admitted to not doing a thorough search of Lizzie's bedroom because, quote, "she was not feeling well," end quote. In the basement, investigators found interesting and possibly incriminating evidence: 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. It was believed the hatchet head was the murder weapon, as the break in the handle appeared fresh. Yet, despite their suspicions, of significance was the statement of the clerk at S.R. Smith's drugstore, who reported Lizzie had been to the store the day before the murders and attempted to buy prussic acid, also known as hydrogen cyanide. According to Britannica, hydrogen cyanide, quote, "is a highly volatile, colorless, and extremely poisonous liquid," end quote. The poison acts quickly, and unless immediate antidotes are administered, recovery is impaired, and death is likely. A few days after the murder, investigators called an inquest to determine the details surrounding the death of the Bordens. Lizzie took the stand 3 times, and her testimony was filled with contradictions, inconsistencies, and most importantly, self-incrimination. Though she didn't have a defense lawyer, there were others who claimed her innocence, including the family doctor. Except here's the thing. At the time of the murders, there were only 4 people inside the Borden home. Andrew and Abby, who were both victims, Maggie, and Lizzie. Maggie's activities were accounted for. She was outside washing the windows when Abby was murdered upstairs, and she was resting in her bedroom when Andrew was murdered downstairs, which left Lizzie Borden.
Prime Big Deal Days is coming October 8th and 9th with exclusive savings just for Prime members. Woohoo! Involuntary deal squeals can happen, like the deal on new running shoes squeal. The deal on a new blender squeal. Yeah! Or the infamous deal on a new massager squeal. Yeah! Save big on electronics, fashion, and more this Prime Big Deal Days, October 8th and 9th.
You know how when you're living your life, and then all of a sudden you're out there helping cops solve crimes?
ABC Tuesdays.
I have an IQ of 160. I spot things that detectives miss.
Fall's most anticipated drama is all new, High Potential.
That big brain of hers is going to help us close a lot of cases.
Caitlin Olsen is the new face of investigation.
You're a single mom pretending to be a cop.
I am not pretending. I'm just out here super copping.
High Potential. All new Tuesdays, 10/9 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
A week after the murders, on August 11th, 1892, Lizzie was arrested and charged with the murders of her father and stepmother. She spent nearly 9 months locked away in a small jail cell, awaiting trial. Something interesting. In the lead-up to the trial, Lizzie's inquest testimony was deemed inadmissible. Her trial began on June 5th, 1893, in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Something fascinating. On June 1st, just 5 days before the start of Lizzie's trial, Bertha Manchester was found murdered in her home. Like the Bordens, she'd been killed with a hatchet. In 1894, a Portuguese immigrant was convicted for her murder and, quote, was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders, end quote. The similarities between the Borden and Manchester murders were nothing more than coincidence. But it may have worked in Lizzie's favor. The hatchet head found in the basement was not conclusively determined to be the murder weapon. No bloody clothing was found at the scene of the crime, despite claims someone witnessed Lizzie burning a dress in the kitchen stove. Despite this, there were a few major inconsistencies, namely, Lizzie's location on the morning of the murders. Maggie Sullivan reported going upstairs at 10:58 a.m., during which time Lizzie reported being out in the barn for nearly 30 minutes. A witness for the defense claimed he saw Lizzie leaving the barn at 11:03 a.m., which was confirmed by a second witness. And as mentioned before, sometime around 11:10 a.m., Lizzie discovered Andrew's body on the couch, after which she called Maggie downstairs and ordered her to contact the family doctor. During the autopsies of Andrew and Abby Borden, the coroner removed their heads. Sometime during the trial, the bashed-in skulls of both Andrew and Abby were brought out as evidence. It was largely suspected that Lizzie would have no reaction, because to that point she'd been cool and collected. But to their surprise, when the skulls were presented for all to see, Lizzie broke down, screaming, wailing, and in full tears. And this may have sealed her fate when it came time for a verdict. On June 20th, 1893, 2 weeks after the trial began, the jury was sent to deliberate. And after just 90 minutes of deliberation, Lizzie Borden was acquitted of the murders of her father and stepmother. Despite her acquittal, Lizzie remains the prime suspect in both murders. She died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927, in Fall River, Massachusetts, just 9 days before her older sister, Emma, passed away. It's been over 130 years since the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden, and the home sits today just as it did back then. According to the official Lizzie Borden House website, quote, "The furnishings retain their rightful place. The decor has been painstakingly duplicated, and the original hardware and doors are still intact. Artifacts from the murder case are displayed while memorabilia from the era line shelves and manteltops. A visitor is literally transported back to that morning when a perfect storm of events culminated in a double murder." End quote. Not only is the home in pristine condition, it's also haunted. It is believed the home is haunted by the ghost of Abby Borden. One article stated, quote, "Many times, an older woman is seen wandering the house. Some guests think it's a maid or the host of the bed and breakfast. Getting up to greet the woman, they find themselves alone. It's Abby, going about her chores, just before walking into the guest room to meet up with her stepdaughter and a hatchet." End quote. Sightings of Abby's ghost occur mostly on the second floor, in the guest bedroom, and the surrounding hallway. Visitors to the room have reported a variety of scary paranormal phenomena, including feeling the bed sheets tighten around them, hearing hands brush against the covers, and feeling pressure on their legs and chest. And it seems Lizzie's ghost haunts the home as well. According to some guests, they can hear a strange but familiar sound coming from the room next to theirs, the sound of someone crying. Others have reported seeing, quote, "an odd shadow stretched all the way up the stairs, and it was moving, swaying at first before rolling up the stairs. A figure, like a person, slowly moving up each step, disappearing at the top." End quote. Other guests have reported seeing lights flickering, seeing shadow figures roaming the hallways and stairs, hearing footsteps in distant parts of the house, and having the spine-tingling feeling they were being watched by something unseen. It seems the spirits of the Bordens are restless to this day. I'll admit, I'm not sure what I think about the Lizzie Borden verdict. It seems the evidence points to her as the murderer. Some say the evidence is merely circumstantial. But like pieces of a puzzle, these bits of evidence point us to the larger picture. Despite the abundance of inconsistencies, contradictions, and the lack of a smoking gun, or in this case, a bloody axe or hatchet, it seems like Lizzie may have very well killed her father and stepmother. As for the haunting, I generally believe these kinds of claims, if only because it's possible. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. Did Lizzie Borden get away with committing literal axe murders back in 1892? Or did someone else commit them? And is the Lizzie Borden house actually haunted? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.